Welcome, everybody, to the University of Applied Research and Development's Emergency Response and Risk Management podcast and videocast. I'm delighted to be here with Younus Imam. He's an emergency management professional in the financial sector. It's great to have you with us, Younus.
Hey, nice to be on. Thank you so much for having me.
I'm delighted because you have so many different things that you're doing, and you've done your thesis in disaster and emergency management from York University. So I'd love to hear a little bit about that today as well. I noticed on your LinkedIn profile about the Salam project. Love to hear about that as well. And then tell us about your experiences in consulting. So all of that together, really looking forward to hearing from you. So how about we start with your current role and interests and things a little bit, what you're doing right now.
Sure. So I work in a financial institution within Canada, and I work within emergency management. What we do is that we respond to security incidences across this financial institution's Canadian footprint. So that might be of various different numbers of criminal and security incidences. Things like, it might be, it's difficult to say without divulging too much, but different crisis incidences. So it might be threats of criminal nature. It might be things like missing persons. Sometimes it's environmental hazards as well. And that's what I do. That's my regular job. And then along with that, yes, so I was involved with developing research for developing security within the Muslim community as a result of the Quebec City shooting. And this is actually the thesis right here. This is what we published through York University. And as a result of that, I was recruited by a number of police officers from the Muslim community in Toronto. And they have a program called the Salam Project. And what they do is they try to build security and emergency preparedness at different mosques. We have a very large number of clientele across churches, schools, mosques, and other organizations, specifically charities we try to focus on.
Tell us a little bit more about that, about what sort of security things that mosques or community organizations need to be aware of, because often people meet together. They meet together because they have a shared religion or passion or interest. They're not thinking we need to protect ourselves. They're thinking we want to get together and share our experiences. So what sort of things are you working on in the Salam project?
So I was recruited actually in the immediate wake of the New Zealand shooting in Christchurch.
Right.
It was obviously a very, very traumatic incident, not just it goes without saying, for the people involved in the incident and people in New Zealand, but people across the world. And all of a sudden it raised a number of very large flags among the Muslim community. We're not prepared for anything like this.
Right.
So what happened was that because of both the work experience that I have and the research that I've published, I was called upon to start speaking about this to different mosques. People just started calling me over, and I would give presentations on emergency preparedness. We did very basic things. So what I'd like to talk about is, the run, hide, defend methodology that we try to espouse. It's basically what the police have. And what we do is we try to give people the tools to respond to emergencies on their own. Essentially, how do you keep yourself safe? Because of that, the police officers in the Salam Project took notice. They recruited me, and what we've been doing is we've been running together ever since. It's a group of professionals across different realms, including urban planning, loss prevention, and just different people in the Muslim community who are trying to build that security. So what we do is that we have a full auditing process. We do a full physical security audit of that mosque. We try to look at what would be hazards, vulnerabilities, different risks, right? We publish that audit towards them. Then we engage in our flagship product, which is an emergency preparedness seminar. What we do is that we look at a couple different things. So one would be hate crime, and how do you prevent hate crime, right? How do you build bonds between different communities? The second thing would be we work on how do you build a security team. And that's actually a pretty basic notion, and that is essentially what we try to do is not focus on expensive measures and procedures, because we know these are charity organizations. they don't have much in terms of funding. So we say things like using very, very inexpensive tools, walkie-talkies, having a security team that understands what their rights are in terms of civilian arrests. They're called citizens arrests. And understanding procedures in terms of reporting and just basic incident management, right? Things like evacuation drills, understanding basic communication procedures. And what we try to do is that we give them the tools to build their own security team based on what they've got, without having to spend a ton of money. That includes also some very, very basic first aid awareness. Obviously, look, none of us are medical professionals, but we try to give them awareness of what Stop the Bleed is and where you can get additional first aid training. At times, I've actually provided them first aid equipment. And we also give a little bit of awareness talks on mental health, conflict de-escalation. That's sort of in a nutshell of what we do. We try to give them as many tools as possible, and then we also try to give the general public a bunch of information and education as well.
That sounds really powerful. So you mentioned run, hide, defend. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So run, hide, defend sounds like 3 words that everyone can remember. And then they can remember the strategies or the actions, the behaviors that they need to do. And then you mentioned some other things as well. So stop the bleed. So you have these sayings that people can remember in situations, because when you're in stressful situations, you don't remember the details, but you can remember simple things like that. Was that intentional?
Absolutely. So one of the things, originally when I had just entered the world, so I only entered the working world about 2 years ago, right? That's when I finished my master's. What happened is that I was recruited by a city government. They're called the City of Brampton. They have an amazingly innovative program called the Lighthouse Project. And the Lighthouse Project aims to build emergency preparedness and disaster relief at places of worship. What they do is that they give these places of worship the tools and training to assist their communities during a time of crisis. So if there's a power outage in the area and there's an area-wide outage and it might be for a few days, that mosque or church or synagogue or gurdwara, they might have a backup generator, they might have a shelter area and staff who are trained in terms of food service and perhaps first aid training, right? And they basically can act as a sort of hub to empower the community. A great example is I had the chance of visiting New Orleans a couple of years ago, and during Katrina, one of the mosques that I visited one of the mosques, and they talked about how during Katrina, the entire community was flooded except for that mosque. That mosque became the shelter for the entire community, including cats, dogs, everything, right? And FEMA eventually started dropping the food packages and emergency supply delivery to that mosque so that they could act as a hub. So that was really great. It helped a lot of people at that time. So that's the kind of model they're doing. They're actually very active in the church community in Toronto. There's dozens of churches that use their program right now, and they were involved in COVID-19 response, of which I was very happy to help out as well in. And so what happened is that when we were trying to outreach to the mosques, many of them being that, there's a very complicated relationship that Muslims unfortunately have with the government because, with countering violent extremism and all these other programs that have been very prevalent in North America, unfortunately, there's a little bit of mistrust with the government. And also, a lot of these people are coming from countries that traditionally don't have very trustworthy governments to begin with, right? Police don't have the police don't have the best of reputations there, for example, right? Because of all the things that people have experienced, right? So unfortunately, there was some resistance to it. And so what we had to do is make it very simple. We had to make it very simple and approachable for people to understand provide them very simple mnemonics, very simple ideas. Now, these are not our devices that we've used. In the United States, the police community in general has created the run, hide, fight motto, and essentially what the Canadian police have done is changed it to run, hide, defend. It's pretty much the same thing, right? Stop the bleed is also from the American perspective. Barack Obama was a huge supporter of that, and all that is pretty much you can greatly reduce the chance of loss of life during a bleeding situation if you hold stop the bleeding at its source by applying extreme intense amounts of pressure to it. And there's a little bit more to that, like tourniquets, but I'm not going to go into that right now.
I think that's really powerful, Younus. I think it's really important that people have these mnemonics to remember things. And also, I think for our students in the faculty who are doing their degrees and doing their masters, understanding that within communities there's resistance to preparedness, which is for their own good, but their resistance is justified based on their experiences. How do you deal with the resistance in the community? You've mentioned some things. How would you suggest someone goes about tackling resistance?
So, I mean, it was difficult because what you need to do is it runs from a couple of different angles. One is that when you in the corporate environment, which in I work, nobody wants to read a book, right? Nobody wants to, like, if you produce, and you could have put a lot of effort into a very long document, right? But at the end of the day, it's got to be one page. It's going to be very simple instructions, and you repeat that over repetition over time. If people want to learn more, you give them that as well, but you'd better make sure that the 5 sentences you have are the best sentences ever. And so it's part of it is because you want to make sure that you can fit it into their attention spans, right? But also part of it is that you want to make it memorable, right? I've had to respond to several incidences and very, very fast-paced incidences in my work in the financial sector, right? These are things where it's going like we're measuring time in seconds, right? It's very important to get priorities straight, because if it's something that could be a life safety event, it's there's no question about it, right? And you tend to forget when there's an emergency going on. You tend to forget everything. What I learned from that, and both, so I also do martial arts training as well in Krav Maga. I did that because I was having so many struggles in my job that I needed to learn how to respond to emergencies in the, physically in the environment itself, right? And what I realized is that you need to learn through rote repetition. You need to make it very understandable, right? Now, when it comes to reaching out to communities, so there's a twofold aspect to that. One is that human beings in general just need very easily understandable things to provide to them. And the number 2 is that you need to build trust. And trust is only built through time. And it's very strange, like even me being a Muslim myself, right, being very involved in the community, at first it was like, they didn't trust me as much, right? Because I'm just some random guy coming in, sure, I've got a suit on, but, they don't know what my intentions are, right? It's gotten a lot easier. So it went from before when we had we managed off 1 or 2 presentations to a couple community leaders before New Zealand, right? And then what happened is that after New Zealand, when I joined the Salam project, we had built our reputation up. People knew what we were doing, and they knew that what we were doing was effective. Right before right before the COVID-19, the lockdown happened, we were now at 99 presentations. And the response has been incredible. And like some of the larger organizations, they've invited us to come again and again and again and provide the training continuously, right? So that's really good. That's all I'd have to say. I think trust. To sum up something that may have been a little bit too ranty, I think trust is very important. Trust is very important to develop in a community.
So someone who's not part of the Muslim community, is not a Muslim themselves. I'm a Christian, but being in Indonesia, it's the largest Muslim country in the world by population. So I'm a little bit more aware of myself in communication, interaction, valuing the beautiful things that bring us together. For people who don't have that background, who are not from the community, how would they, as an emergency response professional, how's the best way to engage with a Muslim community when trying to help them?
I'm going to think about this for a second. I think if you were to tone it down to a couple of pillars, I think the first thing is trust. The second thing is that you need to make your material very approachable, very understandable. And you need to show where's the value being added, right? And here's the thing: you don't need, and you also need to maybe take a look at what marketers are doing. Right? How do marketing agencies provide their material? Because their entire reason, the reason why they have a job is because they get paid to make sure that people pay attention to what that product is, right? So essentially, you need to look at what the experts in marketing are doing, right? And you need to apply those measures. And I would suggest actually asking those people, because that's how you can sell it. Because it seems to be a problem across the whole emergency management field. If you look at business continuity, right, having to build a business continuity program usually is only done in the, it's never prioritized or appreciated until the incident happens, like with COVID, right? As we can see different organizations scrambling with their business continuity measures, things that would have been very easy. And that's just human nature. I would say the most important thing is trust, because once you have the trust of key stakeholders within the community, and that involves, once you have that trust established, I think that it would become much more easier to approach anything, because you have those advocates within that organization, and those people are trusted.
Yeah. So I think that's really good, Younus, talking about stakeholders, and that's, maybe I'll ask the question in a different way. So if we're trying to deploy or establish a preparedness strategy in a community, predominantly Muslim, what would be the best way as a non-Muslim to come in? What are the structural steps we need to think about? Do we go to the mosque? Do we ask for the cleric?
Yes.
What are the steps we should go through to engage?
Okay, so definitely don't try to call or email anybody, because unless it's coming, unfortunately, even I, when, if I'm calling or emailing somebody, unless they know me personally, they're usually not gonna pay attention, because unfortunately it's always like, what does this person really want, right? They're offering me something, but what do they really want, right? So I would suggest, I think this goes for many things in life. You need to go physically, and you need to go say hi, and you need to attend their major events and stuff as well, right? And it's unfortunate, there's no shortcuts to it. You need to actually establish a relationship, and it needs to be to the point where there needs to be a friendship established. Not like, it goes beyond, because in government and in corporations, right, these relationships are sort of placed upon us, right? We don't have a choice we have to work with that guy from HR. We have to do that thing, right? Within these community organizations, if you're doing outreach work, there's no demand upon anybody to do anything, right? Right. For those people in the Muslim community, it's like, this is just some random guy coming off and asking me to do something, right? I don't know what his intentions are. So again, I mean, I don't know, if you're talking about actionable steps, I would say, yeah, absolutely walking up and just approaching them during off hours, talking to them, right? Major thing would be actually going to their big events. So if they're having an open house, Ramadan potluck or something like that, obviously not right now, but if they're having something like that, and you can come inside and say hi. And they usually host these events, and they usually have it open to everyone, right? And you can talk to people, and you can interact, and you can chit chat and stuff, and then that is like a force multiplier. Because not only are you going to, talk to the main stakeholders who are probably going to invite you in and be very nice to you, right? But then you're also going to be talking to other people who are very close friends with those stakeholders. So then all of a sudden you're building that reputation over, you're multiplying that reputation. And what that does, that creates a feedback loop. Everybody talks to everybody else about, your mannerisms, your good character, right? And that shines through. Then when you start asking about, okay, I'd like to assist you or reach out to you for whatever purpose, they become much more pliable to it. And making sure that the messaging is simple and that value is added, right? So and that goes for whether it's a non-profit idea or a profit idea, right? The Salam project is actually completely non-profit. Our organization's everything we do is for free. It's all community funded and community sourced. And the thing is that the problem is that when you don't have it, when you don't have money inflowing for the project, it's very difficult to pour money into outreaching and stuff like that. So you sort of just have to do it as it comes, right?
Younus, this has been really interesting, and it's gone on a tack or a tangent that I didn't expect it to, but it's very, very valuable, I think. So I really appreciate that. For just before we wind up, for people that are just graduating or new to the industry and considering what to do, where to go, what sort of career advice in terms of experiences or trainings would you suggest to someone?
That's an interesting question, Craig. And I apologize if I went on a tangent. That wasn't the intention, but so I think what I would say, I had a lot of struggles coming into this field, and it's only in the last 4 or 5 months that I've seen a difference in terms of being confident about everything. And I know many people who have gotten the education, and yet they actually don't have a job in this field yet. So I'm very thankful for that right now. Not to discourage anybody from it, but there are some steps you need to take. I think the number one thing is experience. I would say that as soon as you're studying this stuff, you need to try to figure out opportunities to get into the field and volunteer. If that means that it's internships, I would actually recommend that you don't even focus on specifically emergency management. I would say go into more operations or security for a very high volume, high traffic area, like a mall or some urban center or a hospital or an amusement park, right? Because what that will do is that you will have to go through some very difficult and tough experiences where you have to make decisions on the fly, and you have to remember things, and you have to deal with stress and sometimes trauma. And what that'll do is that'll grow your character and grow your experience. And I would suggest some things you can do right now is follow podcasts like the Jocko Willing podcast. He's a really great guy, Navy SEAL, talks about leadership and taking personal responsibility for your actions and your success.
Yeah, I really like him. He's great to listen to.
Yeah, he's really amazing.
Because he's been there, done that.
Sorry?
Because he's been there, done that. He's led in the most difficult of circumstances. It's very, very
important. And so I think it's really important to understand, and also throughout the whole process of building yourself and your career, always write down what you're doing wrong. Take personal responsibility for what's going on, because even if it's not your fault, there's a way you could have made it better, right? And that will not only lead you to improving the fastest, but also among your colleagues and your peers, you'll grow the most amount of respect. And obviously always, another important point is to value every voice. It doesn't matter if they have a PhD or London School of Economics PhD behind them, or a medical degree or whatever, right? Or if they're the janitor, right, or the custodian, right? Everybody has something to contribute, and you can learn something from pretty much everybody. And that's what a university teaches us to do. So those are the things I'd be cognizant of.
Younus, really want to thank you for your time, and we've had to juggle things around, and you've been very flexible to make time for us today. So thank you so much, and I wish you all the best for the weekend.
Thank you so much, Craig. You have a great weekend too.